Learning objectives. After completing this module, learners will be able to understand and describe the pastoral nomads and their movement in mountains, plateaus, plains and desert. Elaborate in detail how the colonial rules and acts affected the pastoralists' lives in India and Africa. Understand and describe how the pastoralists dealt with the changes. Understand and describe how the grazing land shrunk gradually through colonial rules. Understand and explain the means of livelihood the pastoralists were forced to take up for survival. Understand and explain how restriction on movement led to loss of cattle stock. Understand that restrictions by colonial rulers did not affect all pastoralists equally. Pastoral nomads and their movements. Nomads are people who do not live in one place but move from one area to another to earn their living. In the mountains, the Gujjar Bakarwalas of Kashmir herd goats and sheep. In 19th century, they settled in Jammu and Kashmir as the region provided good pastures for their herd. They make a cyclical movement between summer and winter grazing grounds. In winters, when the mountains are snow-covered, they move to the low hills of Shivalik. The dry scrub forests serve as ideal pasture land for their animals. By April end, with the onset of summer, the snow melts and lush green vegetation grows on the mountains. This is when they begin their northward journey to the mountains. A number of nomad families make this journey together in a group called the Kafila. The Gaddi shepherds of Himachal Pradesh too move to the low Shivalik hills to graze their animals in the scrub forests in winters. By April, they move back to Lahul and Spiti in the north. In winters, the Gujjar herders of Garhwal and Kumaon region move down to the dry forests of Bhabar. When summer begins, they move back to the meadows called Bugyals in the higher mountains. Bhotias, Sherpas and Kinnoris, pastoral communities of the Himalayas too, follow a similar cyclical pattern based on seasons. Pastoral nomads and their movements. On the plateaus, plains and deserts. Pastoralists are also found in the plateaus, plains and deserts of India. The Dhangar pastoral community of Maharashtra stays on the central plateau during the monsoons as it becomes an ideal grazing ground during this time. By October, they move towards Konkan, where they manure farms and get rice in return. With the arrival of monsoon, they head back to the dry plateau region. In Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, the Golas herd cattle and the Kurumas and Kurubas keep sheep and goats. The seasonal cycle of these nomads depends on the dry and monsoon season, not cold and snow, unlike the mountain pastoralists. The Banjaras of Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra travel long distances in search of pasture lands for their cattle. The Raikas of Rajasthan have combined cultivation with pastoralism. During monsoons, the Raikas of Barmer, Jaisalmer, Jodhpur and Bikaner stay in their home villages where sufficient pasture is available. The grazing grounds get exhausted by October. This is when they leave their villages in search of pastures and water. they return to their villages in the next monsoon season. The duration of the stay of these pastoral groups in any area depends on the availability of pasture and water. While wandering, they establish relationship with farmers for mutual benefit. The pastoralists must have a good knowledge of geography and meteorology to plan their movement. Colonial rule and pastoral life. How did these changes affect the lives of pastoralists? Under colonial rule, the life of pastoralists became more difficult. Considering the grazing lands to be wasteland, the colonial rulers brought more and more grazing land under cultivation. It let them extract land revenue and cultivate crops like jute, cotton, and wheat, which were in great demand in Britain. Colonial rulers imposed tax on salt, trade goods, and the use of land and water. The Criminal Tribes Act of 1871 declared all nomads as criminal tribes. The seasonal pastoral movement allowed grazing grounds enough time for natural restoration. But due to restrictions on movement, the same grazing ground was used continuously, resulting in a decline in its quality. It created a shortage of forage. As a result, animals died in large numbers. How did the pastoralists cope with these changes? The pastoralists dealt with these changes in various ways. Some discovered new pasturelands and some, due to lack of enough pasturelands, reduced the number of cattle. After partition in 1947, the Raikas could not move into Sindh. So, they migrated to Haryana in search of new pastures. Richer pastoralists bought land and settled as cultivators. Many even settled as traders. Pastoralism in Africa. More than half of world's pastoral population lives in Africa. Some of these pastoral communities are the Bedouins, Berbers, Maasai, Somali, Baran, and Takana. Where have the grazing lands gone? Before colonialism, the Maasais lived mostly in East Africa. In 1885, territorial scramble amongst European colonizers resulted in the division of Maasai land into British Kenya and German Tanganyika through an international boundary. The best grazing lands were taken away for white settlement. Losing 60% of their grazing land, the Maasais got confined to a small arid area with scanty rainfall. The colonizers encouraged conversion of grazing lands into cultivated fields. Grazing lands were also turned into game reserves. Masai Mara and Samburu National Park in Kenya and Serengeti Park in Tanzania are examples of such game reserves. Pastoralists were not allowed to hunt or graze animals in these areas. The borders are closed. Traditionally, the pastoralists moved from one grazing land to another as the need be. But in the 19th century, the colonizers imposed severer restrictions on the pastoralists. They were now confined to special reserves. They could not move beyond it. Their entry into markets in areas meant for whites was restricted. Their trading activities were not stopped entirely, but could be carried out with restrictions. When pastures dry. Nomadism is a way of life that allows the pastoralists to survive bad times like drought and avoid crises. But the colonial rulers restricted their movement to specific areas. The Maasais were bound to an arid area which received very little rainfall. Since they were not permitted to move to greener pastures, their cattle starved to death. As per records, in 1930, the Maasai in Kenya possessed 7,20,000 cattle, 8,20,000 sheep, and 1,71,000 donkeys. 2 years of severe drought, 1933 and 1934, reduced the cattle population to half in the Maasai Reserve. Not all were equally affected. In pre-colonial times, the Maasai society was divided into two social groups, the elders and the warriors. The elders decided on the community affairs and settled disputes. Warriors were young tribe members who defended their society and also conducted cattle raids. The British appointed chiefs to administer the affairs of the tribe. They also imposed restrictions on raids and warfare. These measures eroded the authority of both the elders as well as the warriors. The newly appointed chiefs were wealthy people with pastoral and non-pastoral income. They lived a settled life. Occasionally, they would lend money to poor pastorals. The poor ones were forced to look for odd jobs in towns to survive. The traditional difference between the elders and warriors was disturbed. A marked difference between the rich and poor could be noticed. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learned. Nomads are people who do not live in one place but move from one area to another to earn their living. Nomads are found everywhere: mountains, plateaus, plains, as well as deserts. In India, the pastoralists include Gujjar Bakarwalas, Kashmir; Gaddi, Himachal Pradesh; Dhangars, Maharashtra; Golas, Kurumas and Kurubas, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh; Banjaras, Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra; Raikas, Rajasthan. Under colonial rule in India and Africa, the grazing grounds shrank and pastoralist movement was restricted to specific areas only. Any violation of this rule invited penalties or punishments. To deal with their newly cropped problems, some nomads turned into laborers, while those who could afford bought land and settled as cultivators. The Maasai tribe lost 60% of their grazing land to European colonizers. Their grazing land was used for European settlements, cultivation fields and game reserves. The pastoralists in Africa were confined to specific reserves. The colonizers ensured minimum contact with the locals. Restrictions on movement led to shortage of forage and eventual loss of cattle stock of the Maasais. The measure taken by the